ladies and gentlemen, video game fans, who wants to see the game that Devin's been making and see what it looks like at the moment? Anyone? Well, if you don't, you're on the wrong video, and you'll need to leave now. We're going to be talking about Ice Emblem, or as we can see here, I've called it Godless Tactics. I don't know what the actual name will be, but this is a possibility. I've got a list of possibilities. Anyway, so this, if you missed the previous video I made about this thing, it's a... I started making this Fire Emblem clone, basically, and now we're kind of diversifying to make it its own game. Ice Emblem. That's the code name, because it still has Fire Emblem's basis for the battle system, but it also now has a Mountain Blade-esque world map system. So, what we're going to be doing is talking about that, basically, today. So, yeah, that's about it. Why don't we start a new game and listen to some game design rants from Devin, ranting about his own game design this time. That'll be a change, won't it? Jesus. So here we are in the world map, which was, of course, teased last time, but now it's actually been somewhat started, so it has stuff on it. Still, of course, a beautiful MS Paint aesthetic with tiles that don't tile properly, and all the sort of high-quality things you'd expect from letting Devin be the lead artist on your game. So, what's going on here? Let's try to explain the basic situation. We've got land, and we've got sea. Hopefully we can understand that basic premise. And these different coloured bits. First, you've got rivers, which are literally just the same tile recoloured. And you've got sea lane, which is again the same tile recoloured. Sea lane... the thing about sea lanes is, you know, in Mountain Blade, sometimes they have bits where you need to cross water. And the problem with having like a water traversing system separate to the land traversing system is that the AI has to be programmed with like two different move logics and be able to understand whether it's faster to move by water or land to different locations and things like that. So I've gone the Mountain Blade route of dealing with sea travel, and that is, you just make bits of the sea passable as if they were land, and then land AI works on the sea as well. If it's good enough for Mountain Blade, it's good enough for me. So basically it means you can travel certain places over water just along these little channels, or sea ferry lanes as I called them, to, you know, kind of imply that this is a shipping lane of some kind and that it's easy to just sail down it without getting your own boat or something. That's the idea there. So let's focus on the land, because that's where the game primarily takes place. So we have, as you can see, lots of circles around the place, and these circles are parties on the world map. So if you know Mountain Blade, you'll be familiar with that concept. They're much smaller though in this game for the moment. So when you click on a party on the world map, let's first focus on this thing on the left. So this is the party selection thing, where it tells you what you've got selected. So this is the name of the party. It has a type, a thing that tells you how many members are in it, and that's how many squares it can move per turn, how many movement points it has, because as we can see in the bottom left down there, when I mouse over a tile, not all tiles take only one movement point to move through. So like, while I have 6 points, these forests take 3 each, so I can only move 2 tiles at a time in there. I'm sure you understand that. So then we have the list of people who are in the party. We've got a bunch of people with some randomly generated names. There's like lore. I've made some lore for the game. Maybe we'll talk about that later because it's not important. So these are some people on our side, basically, our characters. And if you remember last time, it's the same high quality MS Paint character sprites being used for them. So, there you go. I hope that makes some level of sense. But what is this up here, you might ask? Well, that's because I'm actually standing on top of a settlement. So I've also selected the settlement at the same time. So this settlement is called Persau. It's a level 1 settlement. I think that's what that means. It's an AML trading post, which is like a settlement type. So settlements have types based on their size. It's a little bit like in Medieval 2 Total War, where you have like, or Rome 1, where you have like a... what's it, like a town, a small city, large city, capital, citadel, or something. Like, there are different kinds of settlements, basically. So that's the idea there. And these two things are stats. It's economic worth and military worth to the faction that controls it. And this is a resource. This is how many resources the settlement has in it. We'll talk a bit more about that in a second. Right, so I just moved off my location so I can see it a bit better now. So now I can select the location without selecting a party. What you may be noticing is that when you select things, there's no like indication on them that they are selected. I guess with these you can see their movement range, which kind of suggests they're selected. So that's something we need to do. We also need to put something underneath these locations, like in Total War really, where it tells you the name of it at least. So when you don't have it selected, there's always something there telling you what it is, and maybe showing a few of the key stats to basically indicate to you whether you need to select it when you're looking over the map and trying to decide what to do, rather than having to click on each and say, okay, that one's this level, that one's this level, and has this in it. Just make it a little bit faster to see at a glance what's going on. So anyway, we can also see with a location an extended location menu. You click more. So what this is showing us here is it's basically different tabs of this menu. So the first tab is called the item trader. So this one is showing us what items my party can purchase from this location. You can't purchase the items right now. This is just what's available to purchase if I went there and used the shop, which we'll look at in a second. So as you can see, I've managed to get tooltips going here. This game needs a tooltip revolution so that when you mouse over all these things, it tells you what they are on a tooltip. But right now, the only thing I've put a tooltip on is items in like inventory lists, where it just displays what they are and a little description. So that's the item trader. This location also happens to sell weapons, so we can look at a list of the weapons available there. This list is broken, annoyingly. By putting tooltips in, it means it can't scroll anymore because of how Unity works. So it can kind of scroll if the mouse is in between the items. So you have to use the goddamn scroll bar, which is annoying. I think there is a way to solve that, but I haven't bothered to do it yet. So anyway, yeah, it's basically just telling us that this place sells weapons. And then finally you have an info thing, which is just everything else. So you get a better look at the horrible picture. This is the native culture is the faction that kind of thinks this settlement is theirs, basically, because one of the things you'll be doing is capturing locations and then deciding who should control them. So you might want to take into account which faction thinks it belongs to them, because you may get a bonus if you give it to the faction that it's like a core part of, or something, We have a name, meaning this is a translation from the law's language into real language. The law has two fake languages in it, based off English and French. So this one's based off English, basically. So Pursow translates to Southport. You can see there's kind of a connection going on there. And then it gives you some lore information about the location. I haven't actually written this for most of the places on the island yet. So this will give you some backstory as to what's actually going on in the situation that you're getting involved in. And there'll probably be something at the start of the game as well to introduce it more broadly, so you know like who these factions are, what you're supposed to be doing, what an AML is, and things like that, and why you're on this island suddenly killing people, that sort of thing. So not everywhere has a shop and a weapon trade. If you select a smaller place like this township, which is the lowest level of town, this doesn't have a shop or a weapon shop. So it just only has an info tab if you open the location menu here. You can see here I haven't actually bothered to write anything. In this place, Laywash means Lake Watch. So you can see again, basically there's a connection because this one's based on English. It's more obvious. If we click on something like this one, Vallowed Fur, that's a little bit more obscure, and we can see in its info that means Forest Valley, and this is basically based on French. So I think Ferret or something means forest. The idea is there's another like thing where I just kind of arbitrarily decided on some rules where I say I'll take all the French words and apply this set of changes to each kind of syllable to create a new language that could have descended from French, because this, by the way, is set in the future, as I failed to mention so far. We're set in the future. This takes place in the year, like, just before the year 3000 or something like that. But, we'll save the true detail of the lore for when you play it, of course, because it's going to be lore-rich, and you'll want to explore the exciting world of Ice Emblem, of course. So that is that. What else can we do here on the world map? Well, let's have a look down here. We can open a menu. That's not terribly exciting. We've got saving and loading, which we might look at in a second. It's not exciting. Do you want to guess what saving and loading does? It was really hard to make, but it's not impressive at all. You can save and load the game in this menu, and it's not finished. So that's that. Options doesn't do anything. You can quit. That in the first iteration of the game, you couldn't quit. So that's a pretty major advance, I think. You don't have to afford to get out of it anymore. Special. And you have AML. This is like your general menu where just everything else like about your game progress and stuff will be stored. So right now it just has this inv, which is an inventory list. So this is what the party has in its general party inventory, which is separate to the inventory of all the individual members. So like each member can take things from the party inventory to use in battles, basically. So we've got some random things here and a couple of spare weapons, basically, and that's all that is. And then here we have faction reports, which is a very snazzy menu that I made recently. So this is basically going to be indicating, like, giving you information on how you're progressing towards the victory conditions, because you're basically in this game a small team of like agents, which by the way is where the agent in Agent Mission Luida comes from, which is what AML stands for, by the way. Are we putting things together now? Anyway, so you're out representing a faction known as Lumida, which is the blue faction here. And you're fighting the red faction, you're allied to the green faction, and you're given somewhat of a free rein to decide how a large conflict going on between the red and the green faction is going to play out, and whether you're going to make it favour yourself, the allies, or even the enemy faction. I would like to have the opportunity to be completely free about which side you choose. So you start off with like an alignment, but you may be able to change your alignment later on if you want to, and perhaps based on lore information you might decide, actually I prefer this other faction and want them to win this conflict, and we'll start fighting for them. So this screen basically just indicates across the entire world how things are going. This information is fake, by the way. It's going to be based on all the locations that they control, but most of the locations aren't actually in the game, so it just has some fake strengths for all the sides to test this menu out. So you can see there are two primary stats for a faction. It's economy strength and military strength, and what those actually do is change the size of the parties that they can deploy, or increase the size of the parties it can deploy, and for military it increases the level of the soldiers it tends to deploy. Now, I haven't actually implemented the way these bonuses go into the game yet, so it doesn't actually affect anything in this demo version right now, but the kind of game design idea that this is going to be going for is like, you represent a minor faction. So you're fighting for a minor faction in this war. So if you come in and you start taking settlements for the minor faction and giving them to yourself effectively, this minor faction will have a much lower economy and military score, and so the military forces available that it will have to defend it and to go and fight the enemy forces nearby will be lower in size and lower in level, so they're less likely to succeed. So it gives you this kind of decision you have to make. Do you give settlements to your ally faction, who is much stronger and is much more likely to hold them and go on to defeat enemies using them, or do you try and build up yourself, your own faction, where if you take territory you're going to struggle to actually hold it, and the allied forces coming from your own faction won't actually help you out very much because they'll suck. So that's the idea there. We'll see how that plays out. There's a few factions in the game right now. There'll probably be a few more. That's the main enemy. That's a sub-enemy, the darker red one. This is Lumida. Not yourselves. The AML is its own faction, which is not shown here because it doesn't really hold territory. But you count as a different faction to your masters, basically, the Lumida faction. That's the green faction called Meshmedin, which we saw before. And grey is independent. That's basically places that aren't owned by any of the factions, which we might see a bit later. So what else can we look at? I mean, we need to look at how the game progresses, really, don't we? So the purpose of the game will be a tiny bit like Mount and Blade. You basically go up to enemy parties and engage them in a battle, and that will take you into the Fire Emblem style battle scene that we saw in the previous Ice Emblem video. So we can do it right here. In fact, I think I've made it so that the party starts super over leveled compared to the other stuff nearby. So basically I'm going to walk up to here, I'm going to say attack. So we're now attacking this thing. It's a settlement called Washu, controlled by Yunba. Yunba's the name of the hostile faction, the main hostile faction. They've got a bunch of level 1 guys, so it's nice and easy. Here I'm going to have some kind of like a star thing that represents how hard the battle will be. And I don't think I actually bothered finishing that. Apparently this is a 3-star battle. I think it's going to be even easier than that. In reality, you have an auto-resolve option, which just guesses what will happen, and that's of course what the game's going to use to decide the fights between the AIs when they're just clashing against each other. And you have fight, which you might as well do. That'll take us into this thing, which is what we saw last time, although with a new map, where it's a different tile set and a much smaller map, where you're actually just doing basically Fire Emblem style gameplay. I'm not sure I changed much since the last video, so I guess we won't go over this much. I haven't really done the battle system at all. Like, I don't think this button does anything, no. So basically, when it comes to the battle system right now in this game, you just go like, you know what, I can't be bothered. Win battle, I win. I'm leaving, see ya. So yeah, the actual battle system, which I'm not going to bother showing, where the units fight each other, is the same as in the last video, so that's probably linked if you care. So we are after the battle. We've got a little battle results screen. Now, I guess there aren't really any results to this because nothing happened, but had I killed enemies, you'd see they'd be marked on here as being defeated, and you also, it represents the experience that each person gained in the fight, and I think it highlights them if they leveled up or something like that. So there you go, so we say, battle concluded. Now, the result of the battle was nothing because we just ended the battle, and we saw there some of the AI moving its units around, so these AI factions are fighting each other. We'll go through the system in a little bit of how that works because it's boring and complicated. Let's do the most interesting thing first, which is what the player is doing, and we can represent it by just trying to auto-resolve this. So I'll attack them again. This time I'll just auto-resolve. There we go, we just annihilated them because our party was better, and Tommen leveled up to level 9. You needed a tiny bit of experience to get it as well. And you can see other party members have got some experience from the auto-resolve, so there's a system for deciding who's going to be getting the kills in the auto-resolve and stuff to dole out the experience, but that's not too important. So here, we've won a battle on top of a location, and that means you capture the location. You can also capture it if there's no enemy there. You can just walk onto it and click the interact button, which you might have seen earlier, to capture it as well. So once you've done that, you have to pick who gets it, basically. Now, who gets it partially depends on who thinks they own it. So this place believes it belongs to the Meshmedden faction, so that's why this little smiley face is here. I basically have an icon to represent who wants to get it. So Meshmedden's like, this is mine. I also have the option to give it to my master faction of Lumida. Let's give it to Meshmedden just for fun. So there you go, it turns green. It's going to show some of the AI factions moving around a little bit as well. What we need is something like in TW Warhammer where you can click a thing so that it doesn't bother showing you what the AI movements are, just if you don't care. Anyway, so there you go. Now the settlement belongs to Meshmedden, an allied faction, and they have spawned some units to defend it. This is an outpost type faction. Type location. Outpost type locations, the guard squads that they spawn will move to attack anything that comes near them. So if the Yumba forces came down here or came through this forest, this army would move out to attack them. So you can see the purpose of this is basically to protect the AML base. So in reality, you probably want to make this Meshmedden so that it's strong in order to stop enemy forces coming and taking the base, where if you're like over here and suddenly someone from there decides to come down towards your base, then you need this guard post here to stop them, basically. That's the idea behind all that. So that's the basic concept of the game. The only main feature it's missing right now is the ability to travel large distances. What I want is to be able to say, right, we're going to go for this place up here, right-click next to it, and it will kind of plot out and just move automatically, like cycling through the turns. But right now you have to cycle through the turns manually. So you have to go first, okay, we have to move to there, and the AI does its thing. Wait for it to come back to me. There we go, now we're going to move to there. Wait. So you can see that's kind of annoying. So we need basically it to go into a pseudo real-time mode for moving long distances, where it's just cycling through the turns, and you're sort of watching and have a button you can press to stop cycling if you think something's happening and want to change your plan, or otherwise you'll just keep running through the hills and fields. Of course, it's much faster to move between places that there are roads between. Right now we're moving across open countryside, which costs double movement points, so we'll just go for this village because we can destroy it. And there's one other thing I wanted to show you, I seem to remember, at the village. I wonder what the AI is actually doing. You can come and see what these AI things are. So here we've got a Yumba caravan, a supply train moving towards the front line, and a smaller supply train also probably moving up. I think that's what these are going to be as well. There's an even smaller supply train, a tiny one, medium supply train, and the rest of the things are just garrisons right now. So we might as well talk about how the AI is fighting each other. The way it works is a little bit similar to Sid Meier's Pirates, if you happen to know like how the AI war system happens in there, where basically each kind of location, each kind of settlement can spawn different kinds of parties. So supply trains are one kind of party, and I don't think we can see any others. There's all the garrison ones, which just kind of stand there, so they're not too interesting. They're just there to make there be something to do to capture the settlement, basically, and to defend it against invasion forces. What I was trying to see is, are there any invasion forces on the field? It doesn't look like it. Invasion forces are the ones that actually go and try to take stuff from the other factions, and they're spawned from like military-type settlements, like this fort. And this one up here, Shad Peaksfur, is also a fort. But they only spawn when the location has enough of this, the resource value, to spawn it. So that's the purpose of the resource value on settlements I mentioned earlier. The settlement will gradually gain resources based on its economy score, I think. So it gains like that, put through some function to that each turn. It might just be direct, so that's going to gain 1 per turn. But I think there's a factor multiplier or something to affect the speed at which resources go up. And once it reaches a certain amount of resources, it will say, I now have enough to spawn an invasion force, and one will appear next to it, deplete the resources, and that invasion force will attempt to take the next settlement over. And that's where these supply trains come in, because what they do is they move resources from places that can't spawn invasion forces to places that can, basically. So things like all these villages and these ports and this town here, they don't spawn invasion forces, but they'll spawn, once their resources get to a certain level, they'll put all those resources into a supply train, and the supply train will move to a military base near the front line. And once it arrives, it's going to dump the resources in. This place will suddenly have 100 extra resources and go, now I can spawn 2 invasion forces and go on the attack. So one thing you want to do as an agent who's basically moving around behind enemy lines is to notice if supply trains are going past and raid them to try and destroy them, so that those resources will just be wiped off the map rather than going into the enemy's military bases and thus causing the enemy to spawn invasion forces. So by doing that, this gives you a way to defend territory that's far away without being there. That's the design principle behind it. You just stop the supply of things going up to it, and that will massively reduce the amount of military presence around the front line for the side you're attacking. And of course, hopefully your own side, or the side you're supporting, will be able to build up resources themselves in the meantime to make attacks and perhaps push the front line forward. So that's in a nutshell what the AI is going to be doing. And not all the different settlement types are actually in this island. This has like the low tier ones, so like the biggest thing is a fort, but we'll have things like bigger castles and citadels, and ones that can spawn little parties that not only dump resources in places, but actually increase this. So there'll be like colonists or something, which is also how it works in Sid Meier's Pirates, funnily enough, where once a certain party reaches a location, the location actually fundamentally improves, so it's able to support itself better rather than relying on the supply trains. So that's what some of the larger locations will be able to do, as well as having supply trains walking around the place. And one thing I haven't added in is patrols as well. I'd like larger settlements just to have random guards just moving around nearby so that you can try and ambush them and do things to them and dodge them, or fight them for experience, basically just random mobs that are on the map that you can go for if you want. So that's how the game works. Let's walk over here and just pwn up this place. Boostra is a Yumba township. Nothing special about it. Does it have any lore? It does. A local resident once saw a strange beast drinking from the river. It was said to have 4 legs, stand at least as tall as a human, and featured a straight line of furry hair down its head and neck. It could have been some isolated descendant of the horse, an animal now believed to have gone extinct shortly after the fall of old society. And it means mouth pasture. Boostra, apparently. I guess that means boosh is mouth. Don't know what pasture is. Pasture is. Probably knew it at the time. Anyway, we'll take this. Auto resolve. I think I've broken it in some way. Basically, I was going to try and capture this location to show that this place, because as you can see, its native culture is unaligned peoples. You can make this into an independent settlement that just doesn't really take part in the AI wars. But for some reason it's broken now. I think there's almost definitely a memory leak going on, because it's starting to lag out when I move around as well. You see that frame rate's dying, just moving tiny things across the map. Oh, the Allied faction took something there. That was good. So something's memory leaking probably, or there's some infinite loop that's building. So we can see that an invasion force moved to Shad Peaksfur from Casbida and captured it. There's one more exciting menu to look at, and that is the agent menu, where we can see the agents themselves. So when you click on a guy on your list, you can open up a menu that just tells you more about them. So here's their base stats and their level and class and a bigger version of their picture, how much experience you've got. And there's going to be some randomly generated background for each person just to add to the fun. So right now it just randomly generates their name and where they're from. Refuge Lumida is the capital of where your Lumidan overlords are from. look, you can put things in the inventory of your party members. So that's, I alluded to this being possible earlier. There you go. You can put things in and put them back into the party inventory. And you might have noticed that across this whole game, I'm doing this really basic and accessible UI design. If I may rant for a second, this is kind of a reactionary design to how Total War does its UI, with a reliance on very small things and things that don't fill the screen. So this is my preferred style, and the basic logic behind it is, if you don't need to see the map or see what's in the background while you're using the UI, then there's nothing wrong with it covering like a bit of the middle of the screen. So say like in Total War, when you selected a unit to see its stats, in the new ones at least, you'd get this tiny thing on the left, which was clearly there so that you could see the rest of the screen still while you're looking at it. But what you didn't have is the ability to say, like, I don't care, but I don't need to look at the strategy map while I'm just comparing the stats of 2 units or something. So, like, can we get those full screen so I can actually see them and, like, have a more detailed unit panel that allows me to, you know, intuitively do comparisons and see maybe lore information about the units like it did in Rome 1 and Medieval 2. Basically, those games did it how I would have preferred back in the old days. So that's a lot of the principle behind having big UI elements that are just easy to read. Like the things you click on are giant, so you're not going to miss. There's no tiny icons or anything like that, or at least not too much of it anyway. And that's the same thing as items, but for weapons. You may recall from the last video that an agent carries 2 weapons, and you can switch them out in battle. So you might be able to have a melee weapon and a ranged weapon, and things like that. And right, and the final feature I think that we'll look at is that you can rename the characters. It's Devin. So now you've got Devin. Truly the finest combatant of the modern age. Because, you know, renaming characters is fun. I considered also letting you rename settlements. It probably would be possible. I don't know if it's like there's any point in it, because you're not going to be hanging around the settlements very much. It's more going to be based around the adventures of just you and your team. So I guess the important thing is that you can rename the characters. So while it gives you these randomly generated pseudo-French names based on like future France, you can call them whatever you like. So you can name them after yourselves, your friends, your enemies, your favorite anime characters. So you can see how the game is now taking shape. The idea of the game is there. It's just a case of firstly making it work, adding in the rest of the kind of slightly missing features and finishing things. Then it'll be making the map and balancing it, and then it'll be like things like making the tiles tile properly, graphics, music, adding like map labels so you can see the names of locations. This island is called Skifontbida, I seem to recall, something like that. So you might have it so when you zoom really far out, like that word appears across the island so you can see what it's called, and then it disappears as you zoom in so it's not in the way, that kind of thing. A little bit like in Europa Universalis does something like that. That's the idea anyway. So yeah, I mean, it's already more advanced and playable than some things that have managed to get through Steam Greenlight. So it's a pretty good sign so far. And it's not made in RPG Maker, which makes it about you know, above 75% of the things on Steam Greenlight already. So we're ready to go. But we might as well finish it while we're here. Might as well finish it. Carry on. The glorious forces of Meshbeden destroying the forces of Yumba. Look at their supply trains are running backwards now. Maybe they're going back to that fort to make more invasions at the back, so they can come forward and retake Shad Peaks for... Oh, we need to go write lore for all these places, don't we? So that's that. Let's have a tiny... No. I was going to say let's have a tiny look at the full world map's shape, but let's leave that as a spoiler. Not a spoiler. A thing. Content! This is content we're talking about, but we're not talking about this as content, if you know what I mean. Alright, well, I guess I'll go. Thanks for watching, everyone.